Welcome. My name is Penny Rosema, and you're listening to the Cookware Manufacturers Association podcast. One of our goals at CMA is to keep our members informed. And in this podcast, we're having a conversation with Myron Kanning. Now, Myron's a senior lecturer from the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. He's been described as an outlier, a practical futurist. Myron is passionate about making a difference in the competitiveness of the American economy, and he challenges conventional thinking. Hello, Myron, and welcome to our podcast.
Hello, Penny. Great to be part of your program.
Yes, I'm so grateful that we finally got a chance to connect. I'd love to start with a little bit about your journey. You know, you had a successful corporate career. Why did you shift into the world of teaching, and especially at the university level? This has got to be a big challenge.
You know, you describing it as a journey is probably a very, very accurate statement, because it wasn't when I retired in 2002 kind of the thought, what do I do now? It goes back probably 8 to 10 years prior to that, and I am an avid reader, and I read anything I can find on how people are successful and how the future is going to, change and what's going to happen. So in about the mid-90s, this journey started when I started to think about and read about in the data that America's competitiveness was slipping.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be, if you go back into the 1960s and the 1970s, the United States and Japan was number 1 and 2 in every major economic measure. And then as I started to watch those measures again, I started to see that they were getting into the teens. And today, most of the World Economic Forum majors for the United States, we are somewhere between 6th and 25th. So other countries have outperformed us. And then I combined that with a thought process from a guy by the name of Thomas Friedman in one of his books. It says is that we're just failing slow enough that we're not pretending that we're failing. And I started to think about the whole concept of if you don't know you're failing, what do you and how do you go about changing something if people are not, are pretending it's not happening? So I started to think about the fact is I could impact one company and maybe elevate the performance of one company, but is there a better way for me to get out and to impact, the economy, and how can I go about, driving higher performance and getting people to understand that we are starting to need to go to a different level. So the concept of going back and teaching, and had a friend ask me is that, as you getting ready to retire, what do you want to do? And I told him I want to go and I want to teach at the college level. And I said, and if I had my preference, I'd want to go back to my alma mater, Indiana University, and teach there. And sure enough, timing is everything. I applied, and they had an opening, and I ended up back at Indiana. So that's, kind of how I got there. But, if I knew if I stayed in corporate America that, it just was not, that I wasn't going to be able to do that. So my whole thought was if I plant the seeds in all the minds of students, they can take it and they can embrace as they expand their careers, and they can start making a difference. And I'm naive to think that maybe all 10,000 students that I've had up to this point in time have grabbed onto all of it, but there is a very significant portion that, I'm really confident that caught on to what was going on. And so I really look at them as being the change agents going forward. So that was my rationale, is that I wanted to make a difference, and the best way to make a difference was getting into the college education system.
Well, you certainly have a broader range of influence by hitting, even if there's, a small portion of that 10,000, you certainly made a bigger influence than if you would have just stayed with one company. So I can understand how that happens. It just kind of, you put it out there in the universe and it comes back at you, doesn't it?
It sure does. And tell my students I don't measure myself based upon the grades they get in my class. I measure it when I hear back about they made a positive impact in the economy.
Good. To remind listeners, we're talking with our a practical futurist, Myron Kanning. He's a senior lecturer at Indiana University, the Kelley School of Business. Somewhere I had heard, Myron, that you have or offer a people process, something about some specific steps. Now, is that something you offer out there, and did you develop it while you're at the university? Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
I have what is called my high results guarantee, 5 steps high results guarantee. And it has been a collection of watching great CEOs over time and then seeing what they do. And I have kind of found out that there's 5 critical steps that they use in getting high results. I've seen it used by one person to get 98% of the market share, and I've seen it by another person who fired a third of his volume when he fired his biggest customer, how he recouped it, and that is in the rearview mirror. And these are just 5 steps, and what I do is I observe them, and after I observe them, I gave them the 5 steps, and they said, I never thought about it, but those are the 5 things that I really do. And so I offer that to anybody that would like to have it, and however you would like to distribute it to your membership, up to you.
Hey, that would be great. I'll take a PDF of it and we'll post it along with this podcast on our member side of our cookware.org website. So thank you for that offer. That's great. And also, if people wanted more information from you, if they have some questions that come up from the rest of our conversation here, correct me if I'm wrong. Your email address is mgkannin@indiana.edu.
That's correct.
So and I will also post this as well, so people didn't write quickly enough there. They'll be able to see that, from the podcast posting on our website. Let's talk a little bit about what you see will be different. What's going to happen going forward? You're this practical futurist. Give us some insight.
Well, you can't really discuss what's going to be different without looking back a little bit, okay? And if you look back, most business leaders will tell you the last 5 years have probably seen significant change in how they have to do business. I refer to the future, and from the readings that I am doing, as going from chaos to chaos squared. It's a simple way to describe the future. To emphasize, how and visualize kind of this, think about how Jim Collins in his book Good to Great called the flywheel. And as the flywheel starts off slow and it starts to spin faster and faster as it gains momentum. Well, change is going to gain momentum. It started slowly and it continues to gain momentum. And when speed continues to increase at an escalating rate, it's referred to, a lot of people use different terms of geometric progression or exponential speed, but it just continues to get faster and faster. And if I go back in my business career, in the 60s and 70s, I used to have to balance in parallel 3 forces: labor, machines, and the government. They drove very little change. So back in the days of the 60s and 70s, when we were on top of the world, is because we had the formula and we didn't need to change. We were good, and we were very, very good for that time. Now, if you look at that as a graph, that was kind of like a horizontal. Business today now has to balance over 20 different forces happening in parallel all the time. And that creates a major, major shift in speed. So when you look at the graph, and if you look at going from horizontal, you're looking at it approaching almost vertical in the rate of speed. And the major drivers of that are the 3 disruptors of the world: globalization, technology, and the new kid on the block, which is collaboration, where you're starting to see companies collaborate with each other to make differences and change. So when you look at this, and I think about two quotes that absolutely put me into a perspective that kind of puts that into what is really going on out there now. The first one is Ray Kurzweil's quote: "The changes in the next 100 years are going to exceed the changes of the last 20,000." And the other one has to go to Mark Ferosa from Hertz, who says, business has never been more volatile. And he used to see 2-year competitive advantages. Now he hopes for 2-minute competitive advantages. So these two quotes tell me that business has changed and it'll never be the same again. And so we can't wish it to be the same again. It's going to continue to move at an increasing rate of speed in a direction that is going to force us to make different changes.
So we need to go into this eyes wide open with the 3 points you talked about: globalization, technology, and collaboration. Can you kind of look to the future and talk to us a little bit specifically, because our association is directly involved with manufacturers. How do you see this look for manufacturers? Any comments to that?
Well, yeah, in chaos squared, as with any change, business will have to choose to either survive or thrive. And that is a decision that is so basic. What are we going to do? Or am I going to try to hold on to what I have, or am I going to look at all this change as an opportunity to expand? So when I look at that, I fundamentally sit back and say that there are 4 rules to the future that you're going to have to embrace. The first one is you can't do business the way you've done it in the past, no matter how successful. And in some ways, success can be an impediment to the future, because if you're very, very successful, it takes more effort to change than if you fundamentally, have been struggling. So it's not going to be the same. So that rule is there. The second one is you got to align your organization around simple goals to where everybody in the organization is aware about what you are trying to get done. In the past, to improve productivity in a plant, I used a rule that the plant was working 9 hours a day, and the people didn't like that. We used a rule: make 9 and 8, and that was the fundamental rule. And they rose to that occasion, and we both benefited from it. We got higher productivity, and they got off of the overtime. And a lot of people said, "Boy, how long did that take you?" And it took us about 3.5 months. And so there is so much power behind these, within all these major processes that we do. There is a people process, which I talk about in my 5 steps. Rule 3 is you got to embrace reality about yourself. By embracing reality, you got to be openly honest, and you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is what we really are. What I always liked to look at was 3 things about reality, and that fundamentally, what's our customers think about us? What's our employees think about us? And how do we stack up against the other businesses in the world? And if you don't know those 3 things, you are opening yourself up to not be successful in the future. And rule 4 is you can't go it alone. I mean, in the past, we have been able to be, pillars of strength as companies. We've been pillars of strength as management and laborers. We've been pillars of strength. We've got to start utilizing every mind that is possible, because in rapid speed and rapid fire change, the more minds that you have, the better off you're going to be successful. So collaboration is going to be one of the growing necessities for businesses going forward.
I like that. The 4 rules of the future. One of them is that there's new rules. Success can sometimes not be your friend. If you're really successful at something, it's hard to say, I need to be looking at how I should change. Number 2 was alignment, making sure that you're aligned with you. That you talked about the power and the people that you had in your organization. 3 was to embrace reality, know what your customers, your employees, and how competitive you are. And number 4, you can't go it alone. I just can imagine the power in more minds together rather than thinking that one organization or one person in the organization has the ability to make the best decisions. So collaboration,
Right.
I can clearly see as a powerful tool. This is a little
Specifically,
overwhelming. Oh,
specifically, you asked me about manufacturing, and I didn't quite get there. Okay.
okay, good.
All right. Well, when it comes to manufacturing, Penny, is that to me, I think Gary Scott, in his writings, when he talks about the future of AOEs, automation of everything, that manufacturing is going to be rewritten with advances in technologies. And more specifically in manufacturing, 3 and 4D printing is going to become part of everyone's offering. The barriers to entry is going to it will be lessened, so more competitors are becoming into, most markets. Investments are fundamentally, going to be used to advance and not so much used to sustain. So, it's going to have to be, look out. You're going to have more and more competitors. I truly believe that businesses in the future are going to be more competitors, smaller competitors, and that's going to be how markets are going to reshape.
Mm, more and smaller competitors. AOE, automation of everything. I like that. It's a little overwhelming. How detrimental is this going to be to existing businesses? You talk about more and smaller competitors. What do existing businesses have to be prepared for and how?
Well, I don't. I think the future is very, very bright. I tell everybody what I wouldn't do to be 19 again to be able to go out and compete in this market. Um, it's going to be different. It's without a doubt, it's going to take different skills. But if companies decide to be what I call progressive and proactive, they will be great. The growth opportunities have never been better. You've got to think differently and use different skills than historically have got us to where we're at today.
Okay.
The role of top management has to be, and got to ask the questions, either how do I get to the top or how do I stay on top in a very, very changing market. I always challenged organizations, what do we need to do to be the best in the world? And I think if leaders of organizations start challenging their groups around that question, they will find answers they never believed that they had embedded. I live by the rule. Every answer to every issue we are facing is somewhere within our organization. What we have to do is create the culture to where those answers can elevate to the top.
That's powerful. We're talking with Myron Kanning, the practical futurist, senior lecturer at Indiana University. Myron, I thank you so much for your time and valuable tips. I'd love to give you an opportunity to close with some, final words of advice.
Well, the future going forward is going to be different. So fundamentally, that tells us that we have to be different to be successful. And if people start to embrace the fact is that what worked in the past is not necessarily how we're going to get to the future, but start looking for the new, better ways to become competitive, they will find them. Because as you know today, with all the social media, with all the writings that everything and everybody is doing, that more and more people are posting things. What you have to do is just do a great job of sorting and finding those things, and you will be successful in the future.
I like that. Look and you will find. And I would top that with listen, because you talked earlier about listening to people within your own organizations and the power in the people. So there's lots of places to go to and look for that bright future. Well,
Thank you very much.
yeah. My name is Penny Rosema. We're recording for the Cookware Manufacturers Association. Listeners, if you would like more information about Myron, I'll read his email address again, mgk at indiana.edu. Myron will be sending me the PDF of the 5 critical steps that will be included when I send this podcast out. And if you want more information, certainly they can reach out directly to you, Myron. Is that why we're giving
That's
the...
correct.
That very good. Thank you so much. Listeners, we need your feedback so that we can continue to keep you informed. Love to hear whether you felt this audio interview was valuable to you. Do you have other questions or topics you'd like to suggest for future interviews? Let us know. My email address is prosema@cookware.org. prosema@cookware.org. You will find this podcast and others in the member section of cookware.org website. Look for the link that says CMA Podcast. Myron, thanks again for sharing your precious time today and information and your 5 steps. And I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Enjoy the day.